Buenas tardes. Las invitamos y los invitamos.
Good afternoon. We invite you all to take your seats, please, and we will start the session.
¿Saca? Sí. Y le das la bienvenida también. No, ahora los vamos. Y vos le das la palabra a Rama.
Dá para me ver? ¿Sí? ¿Vamos? Hola. Buenas tardes.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Denia Daveriano. I am the director for Latin America and the Caribbean for Climate Champions, and I am grateful for the interpreter that is going to help us to have a bilingual event. And well, as it has been suggested by the title, today we're going to discuss the role of non-party stakeholders in fostering just finance and inclusive energy transitions. The parties at COP27 recognize that just energy transitions recognize that the just transitions require meaningful and effective social dialogue, giving all the diversities that we have here. What we're hoping from our informal conversations is to see what is considered just for our region. We know that the mechanisms, the innovative mechanisms and collaboration platforms in the public and private sectors are critical to catalyze just energy transitions. But how do we ensure that those that are program are fairly just? What we're going to share are available, and we aim to contribute what is going to contribute. To start our session, we have the pleasure to listen the opening remarks for Ramiro Fernandez of campaign director for climate change team, and then we will continue with the panels. Thank you. Thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be here with you today and be able to speak in Spanish. To be honest, it's a privilege to create this space of dialogues where the high-level champions have decided to propose in all of the regional climate change weeks dialogue for just energy transitions. This is a joint work between the high-level champions and the Secretariat of UNEP. And part of this dialogue spaces is to have principles, priorities, barriers, opportunities, cases of success cases that are being generated in the regions, and the development on the principles of what is a just energy transition. We know that in Latin America itself, we know what are the principles to create what is the energy transition in the region. Is difficult for us to come to an agreement, and if we're also looking for it to be just and to have principles of equality and development, then there are certain dialogue things that we need to look at to enrich what we're doing. We know that a just energy transitions has to be integral. It has to cover several areas. It needs to approach the needs of the region, and it needs to transcend the look for mitigation and adaptation. We need to remember both. We need to have both challenges. And this is why the framework of the champions, we include not just energies for mitigation, but also for adaptation. Under the JAR adaptation agenda, there are matrices regarding energy that have to do with clean cooking, access to energy in sectors that do not have access. And we just left a cooling workshop that is also integrated as one of the goals and objectives for future adaptation. So it has to be comprehensive. And it also needs to be inclusive. We know that the energy projects that are being developed and are being carried, in the last instance, they end up being installed in this physical space where they are being affected by the different communities and they are not being linked to the needs and developments of the different areas. How do we create to the principles of participation and integrity and the participation of these communities for those projects and as part of the principles for energy transitions? This is how we have to be just in financial terms. And we know that one of the key challenges in developing countries such as ours is the capital cost. And we need to generate financial mechanisms that are innovative, that can reduce the cost of the capital so that the implementation of these projects occur and that you do not generate new levels of debt for countries that are already at their capacity of covering any more debt. The just energy transition that we need to go through requires unprecedented investment levels for our region. And to do this under a framework and a principle of integrity for the high-level champions is key to guarantee the development of these regions and to make the energy transition a possibility. This is why we hope that throughout today's conversation, we are able to discuss and to see certain levels that are linked to the reduction for direct costs and the progressive elimination of fossil fuels, increase of the power of renewable energies, and the development of activities for responsible mining and the safeguard for environment and the environmental safeguards that we should have. How can we develop community resilience for energy projects, and also how do we ensure energy resilience and new challenges that are faced by the region? How do we generate conditions for the retraining of the work labor force and for the insurance of this area? This is why the package that embarks what we call JETCO and collaborative just energy transitions for the champions is composed by 5 products. On the one side, we have these regional councils, and what we capture of these regional councils that are being developed and a compilation of success cases that have been implemented in the different territories, and the creation of a baseline documents with academic entities that we are cooperating with, and the development of a first proposal for a framework of this just energy transition that is also collaborative. And this collaborative, the principle for eligibility and the criteria to compose the metrics and the future reports. And lastly, this package is going to be composed by a pre-selection of pilot products that will reflect this, and it's going to be presented during COP28. This all together is going to contribute to the result of the framework for the global stocktake for the high-level champions. This is the objective. This is the dialogue space that we're inviting you for, and we hope we can we count on your active participation. And with this, I wish to give the microphone to the moderator, Luciano Cantoli, who is the director of the energy program. Thank you very much, Ramiro, for your remarks. Very descriptive from the process that we are carrying out, and to get an example of what are the type of projects that we are referring to with the people in the heart of the transitions. I wanted to invite Ms. Valerie Laggi, the permanent of secretary of from the Secretariat of Energy of Suriname.
uh, bringing off-grid renewable energy solutions to the rural communities in Suriname as part of a nationally appropriate mitigation action. Mrs. Laggi, many thanks for joining us today. The floor is yours. You can.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for having us here. A special thanks to the UNDP who made this possible. And they are actually also our main partner in this project. For those of you who are not familiar with Suriname, just a quick information about Suriname. Suriname is the only Dutch-speaking country in South America. And we are neighbored by Guyana and French Guyana. So French Guyana is only the only French-speaking country in South America. And we have approximately 600,000 people living there, of which the majority is in the coastal area. But you also have villages, so we have Maroon communities and we have indigenous communities living in the hinterland. And of those, we have around 300 villages, of which 50 are indigenous and 250 are Maroons, of which, of course, again, we have 6 tribes. The Maroons are divided in tribes, so we have 6 of those. And the area where we are working at, where we are executing the NAMA project, is in the east of Suriname, bordering French Guyana. We have a banner over there, so maybe at the end you can have a look and also look at the map of Suriname and where the project is being executed. That is the Pamaka area. It's one of the tribes. And they speak Pamakan. It's their native language, which a few of us also understand. And if you work with them, when you come to Suriname, I think you will catch up the language very easy. All right, so within the Ministry of Natural Resources, we are working in the communities, bring energy to them, but today we're focusing on this specific community, the Pamaka community. So what are we doing? We are trying in the whole, in our efforts to have energy transition, actually available energy for all, 24/7 energy, renewable, so clean energy. We are installing PV solar systems in the villages. The Pamaka area has around 13 villages, of which, and around 11,000 people living there. Of the 11,000 people, actually a few are 1 to 2,000 are living in the city and are constantly traveling. So this project, why we have chosen that, because that is an area where we can develop 13 villages if we are successful in implementing, but also it goes up the river going into the other areas of Suriname where we can also continue to executing this process and project. So we are, as the Suriname, we are committed to the welfare and well-being of the people. We are also building resilience, but we are also looking at the fuel supply that we have now, because what they are having now is diesel generators. We have to bring the diesel to the interior. It's costly, it's a lot of work, but besides that, also it's not environmentally friendly. That's why we are aiming to go full renewable energy. So the current electricity provision for the interior is 6 hours per day, because we cannot provide them with all the diesel that they need for the generators to function 24/7. It's very costly, so we are transitioning in the PV solars to be able to give them 24/7 energy. And just to touch on that, that also makes it possible to give them clean drinking water, because we are trying to also link that project or that process with the energy provision. The enhancement, of course, it will create economic spin-off. People will be able to go back to their living area or to have a better standard of living. They'll be able to work longer hours to produce and to open up their homes for us or for tourists to come and be there. So this is really for that community, and they will, of course, have very much benefits on that. The greatest difficulties that we have and that we can talk about is the transportation to the communities. I don't know how you are in your countries, but from the city to the border, it's around 4 hours to drive by road, right? And then besides that, you still have to take a small boat to go on the river. I think maybe a few of you are familiar with that situation. But the boats are not that big to bring like very big diesel generators and very heavy equipment. So there is a lot of transport and logistics going on there. So one of the main challenges that we have, and what makes everything very costly, is the transport to bring it over there. And they are very clever, they can do it, they have been doing it for years, but still that is one of the aspects that we need, that we need to be clever with. This project will install 2 PV solar systems in the villages. I will call some names. You may not be familiar with it, but if you go there or go online, you will see the villages. It's from Langatabiki up to Loka Loka, that are the villages alongside the river. And we will choose 2 of these villages to install the PV solar systems. We are now actually in the process of, together with another organization, of looking into one of the other communities, that is Tulmans Island. It's actually like a district, a small district within the interior where there are schools and hospital and all the other ministries have their services there, where we will be installing PV solar systems. And this project specifically aims to have that and to have 2 small shops where the people can go and charge and have their business done, go in for internet and small kind of stuff. So for now, we are looking into creating hybrid systems. So we will not take out the diesel generators. The Ministry of Natural Resources now specifically and mainly provides energy through the diesel generators. That has been done for many, many, many years. Now we are transitioning, and we will not take out the diesel generators at first because we want to have a hybrid system when we can really progress and improve. We will have that diesel generator on standby only. Within the communities, we are now going to commission one of the clusters, and that one also has a backup generator. That is how it has been designed, and I think because of the remoteness of the area where you have to travel sometimes by boat, by road, by airplane, that it's best that you have a backup until the technician can come out of the town, out of the city to look at the possible defect that there is if the locals cannot handle that. Yeah, so in line with NAMA, Suriname is going to improve the access for renewable energy in the interior. We have the 3 main steps that we will take. That is the establishment of the institutional structure and securing funding. That's one of our big steps. So if we don't have the funds, we cannot proceed. We have secured some funding. We are in the process of securing more funding, and we are looking for partnerships as well. Also looking at the state that Suriname is in and the beneficial position that we have within the world actually, and the carbon emissions that we are, the carbon credits. So we are looking in for partners, and we are looking for securing the funding. The second is the implementation itself and the training of the people over there, because we do believe that we need to enhance the capacity of the locals over there to be able to sustain and to monitor and manage these systems. And the third is the implementation of the technical interventions. You can continue, please. All right. So for this part of the project that we are presenting, the total project cost actually is 5 million, and the requested, the needed funds of 5 million. Is 5 million, but can you shift a few slides back? I forgot to mention actually. Let me see if it's there or the coming slide. Yeah, here. Just to have a quick on your right, the little box over there, the mitigation impact that it will have. So the estimated mitigation impact over the lifespan is 25,000 tons CO2 equivalent. The estimated project lifespan is 20 years, and the project duration is 5 years. So we're actually already started, so we hope to finish it as soon as possible. You can shift back to the other slide, please. I think I was at the last slide. Yeah, this one, and then the last slide. All right. So this is an overview of what we want to install. I see I don't have a lot of time, so I was trying to cover as much as possible within the minutes that I had. So this is an overview. I would like to also share, if it's possible, with the organization if there's more, are there more questions, if there's more information needed. And please, I would like to refer to the banner as well, and we will be here to answer some questions. But this is, in short, the NAMA project that we are actually implementing already in the process. Again, thanks to UNDP for really pushing that process and helping us and assisting us in getting that done. And of course, to the Ministry of Natural Resources. I thank you.
Thank you very much. It was close. Thank you very much for this interesting example of what we're looking for. In fact, this was really inspiring, Mrs. Deputy Permanent Secretary. And this helps us also to frame the discussion about what types of projects can contribute to, I don't know, no sé por qué estaba hablando en inglés.
I have no idea why I switched to English to see what type of projects can contribute to the development of just energy transitions in the region, and to continue framing this conversation. We have two back-to-back panels that will allow us to approach this issue. First of all, we are waiting for remarks from specialists and certain roles and hats that will help us to frame these conversations, and then we will ask some specific questions regarding the justice of the energy transitions. We are having a difficult connection with Fanny Cuiro Castro, General Coordinator for COICA, from the indigenous organizations from the Amazon Basin. And I hope that we can have this, that we will be in touch with her. And also in this first panel, I have the pleasure of having the vision of three references of different organizations. Is Ana Carolina Espinosa from NRGI. If you could please come forward. I would also like to invite to this panel Carlos Salgado from the United Nations Program for Development. Okay, so we have a ladder on the other side that is going to make a reference to Sustainable Energy Hub. And I would also like to invite Ricardo Pineda from IANGO from Honduras, that is going to also present a very interesting thing, a very interesting initiative. Please, do you mind if I take a seat with you? And hopefully we can link Fanny soon, but we can start from the beginning. As Daniela mentioned and Ramiro afterwards, it is very interesting for us to take care of the regional areas to see what are the visions and of what are the visions of ethics that are put here, and from the same region to see them operating in the same region and based on those attributes, and to make sure that those transitions are just in energy, mining, and in our region. And I would like to ask you first, Ana Carolina, what does it look like from the energy perspective on the topics that have to do with energy and justice, and for what are some of the benefits that we have in the initiatives for cooperation led by non-state actors?
Muchas gracias, Luciana, por la invitación y por este espacio para la conversación
And we will have this, and definitely this is a conversation. It all depends on the context of the stakeholders of who we are talking to. And and also we have three key messages that we need to do this. The first one is that we all agree that transition has to be just, and in order for it to move forward, it has to be just. And we know climate change brings inequities for a different model and also to push the inequities. But we might have an opportunity to reduce those inequities. And how do we organize ourselves for the matter of inequity? And equity is key. And I would say that it's a moral imperative, of course. But I will also like to add to the table that there is a practical consideration. It's not just a moral imperative. If the transition is not just, it's not going to happen. And it won't happen unless that the workers that today work on the sector of fossil fuels see a possible out. They will not be able to become actors to promote this unless the communities promote the territories and that they understand that there is a benefit for greater energies, or that young people and women see that there is a possibility for access, or there won't be an ownership process in the transition and the process will be slower. So it's a moral imperative, but it's also a practical consideration that we need to take. The second message is that definitely there are many benefits and having a collaborative benefit of work with the stakeholders and working with the societies, especially at a territorial level. And I would say that often it go it opposes the JEP's financial mechanisms where the international community negotiates with the decision makers in a country what should be the pathway for this energy transition and how we should carry out the policies versus the local processes. I would say that there is a potential for both, and I say that it all depends on the interconnection of the processes, the success for this, and of course the JETPs and these mechanisms for agreements and partnerships between the international community and the countries is important, not just for the financing and the political support that these deep processes of transformation require. And we have to be linked to the needs of the people and to what definitely improves the lives of people at the level of the different territories. And we will encounter several difficulties. This is something that we have encountered for the JETPs that we have been signing. In the case of Senegal, is something that we have been observing, and there is a huge gap in terms of defining what is the role of the civil society in these processes, how the civil society monitors these processes, because these are long-term processes. It's not just taking the picture, but who is in charge of giving this a permanent follow-up and to make sure that these partnerships are being translated into defined processes and that for them are key topics. And because we have these territorial dialogue processes with the communities that will allow us to identify more specific policies. In certain cases, it will be a topic of compensations that have left the hydrocarbon industries or carbon, etc. So it will be a case of employment, and that territorial dialogue is fundamental. It's fundamental for us to have a connection with that subnational level, and this process of co-creation for public policies is very important. And lastly, and there are three things that are key for enabling of the non-state actors: the creation of certain spaces, if there are permanent institutional mechanisms that will allow us to design the specific public policies that will show us if there is a specific benefit for them. Thank you, Ana Carolina, that for them to be just and to avoid these transitions to fail. This is a good way to frame the conversation. Carlos, I wanted to ask you, based on certain things that you were saying, what does it look like from the UNDP Sustainable Energy Hub? What role does the topic linked to financing and capital costs to release some of the burden, as it says, in some of the renewable energy sources? What does it look like? Thank you. Thank you, Luciano. It's always good to listen to you. You're always so close. And I am Carlos Salgados, and I am the regional specialist for Latin America and the Caribbean for UNDP. And I have an expertise in finance. And well, we have global objectives for UNDP, basically for energy, which is to provide access access to energy to over 500 million and to ensure energy transition. So in a way, we have three pillars to create this. This is why we have created the Hub for Sustainable Energy in UNDP that I work for, is to support the implementation of the objectives. When we're talking about the energy areas, we're talking about transportation, energy efficiency, green hydrogens, and also access to clean energy. Like in the case of Suriname, we are working with mini breaks that it's just not just access to energy. We need to close those few gaps of access to energy. But the Sustainable Energy Hub has three pillars. First of all is energy access. The third pillar is the topic of energy finance. So here we enter with Luciano's question, and I believe that we have a situation here in Latin America and the Caribbean that it's very specific because the internally for public funds we are not the priority. We have Africa that it's a great priority for donors, and we have Asia that has a great reduction. And we have the energy investments are having the credit for 2034, but 90% goes to developed countries and China. So we have middle income country, very difficult, the Caribbean with their singularities in Caribbean. But we need financial innovation. That is the word that we have civil society, we have financial systems, we have public power and private sector to do this work. But I believe that the way in which we can talk about this issue is with financial innovation. We need to use the limited existent public funds that we have to catalyze the private investments and to use smart regulations for that. So I believe that in that sense, that's where we want to go if we wish to catalyze the investments. And this topic that has been very important topic discussed by Anna. How can we work the stakeholders to structure the mechanisms from the bottom up, not top down? And here I would like to discuss the topic of labs for financial innovation. There is an opportunity for us to work. We have knowledge and we can structure innovative mechanisms, and we need to discuss the topic of risking reducing risk of the investment through public policies and risking, but also transferring the risk of the private sector. And we could see different instruments for guarantee funds for the first floor, for the second floor, and also compensation mechanisms and financial incentives that the public sector can grant to mitigate risk. This is a great opportunity to wrap up here, understanding that we'll see is structured for blended finance, combining public capital and private capital, always working with the local financial institutions. We need to support the local financial institution, public and private. And well, here we enter in the topic of financial innovation. And in our regions, we have the second floor of public banking that has the capacity of opening new markets. And here we can see a great opportunity to catalyze investment for just energy attentions. And when I say just, I say that we have the energy hubs, and we're not just talking about mitigation for climate change. We have adaptations for climate change topics. It's social topics, it's gender, governance, and financial and environmental topics. Because here we're talking about the Amazon. It's not just mitigation for climate change. It's what is the impact to the national parks in the Amazon, and all of this is part of the analysis and what are the local opportunities. So energy transition is something very complex, but I believe that we have the capacity in the region to attack the process. So thank you. Thank you very much, Carlos, and I'm sure that we have a bunch of questions. But every time that we talk about financing, we open our eyes. Something very interesting for us to. It's wonderful that we have been able to perform a dialogue similar to this in all the countries. We're still missing the one from Asia Pacific that is going to be coming on. Is that the priorities are not trivial. Sometimes we are prejudiced about preconceived ideas of what a region can have, and there are specific things that the dialogues are truly enriching. And yesterday, on an event regarding youth that was done in the plenary session, the support team in Honduras showed something, and the networks is very similar in concept to the project that was discussed earlier by Suriname, by the permanent and these are some of the things that we're used to listening to. And it triggers something different that it's always, I think that it's important to get young people to talk about the role of young people and not to feed in this dependency that we have. The decisions that we make today are the ones that will have an energy support here. This is why, Ricardo, I wanted to ask you, what is your view on regard to these things that we need to have today for the energy transitions that should have an impact, and things that should frame this dialogue based on your point of view? Thank you, Luciano, and thank you for the people present here. And I'm here with the difficult task of representing youth, millions of young people that are always complaining on this topic of energy transition, and try to summarize it in a few minutes. I think I have 3 points that I believe that are non-negotiable for Latin American youth. And the first one is just retaking a little bit of the example that you gave regarding us, that we consider we should have a significant youth inclusion. It's not just youth inclusion, but something that is worth it, that it's empowering, and that goes beyond consultation. What does I mean by this? And I go with a very specific whereas our organization, the average number of our organization, Sustenta Honduras, is 25 years. We're very young, and as a young organization, we don't have the money of this project that we heard from Suriname that we would love to do stuff like this, but I also need to recognize that if we have difficulties to access of financing, this is difficulted by the fact that we're talking about youngs. We are programmers. We know about big data. We know about Python. We know how to apply data use for the energy planning. And what have we dedicated ourselves to create models, virtual models of low cost, where we can tell you clearly Honduras is taking the taking a back decision on this, and many are not doing the right energy planning. And we have presented this in some of the most important academic forums in the world, and we consider that including young people in topics of energy planning in projects that are linked to just transition is something fundamental, because our skill sets are different, but they contribute a lot. And this is a skill set that we have grown with this. We grew up with computer, and we have reduced up to 70% and decarbonize at the same level. Of course, we believe that these things should be included the same way. And as a Hispanic, I will fail if I don't talk to you about the LACCW agreement. This is an agreement that is looking to guarantee public access to information. And I am from Honduras, and a few years ago, an environmental defender, Berta Cáceres, was murdered when she opposed to a hydroelectrical project because it was in conflict to some of the cultural values given by indigenous community in a river. And I believe that this is the dark side of renewable energy. Despite its clean energy that is going to take us to decarbonization, we should always need to have just energy transitions. I don't see a future of JETCO where they are not enforced to honor the LACCW, and I am sad to see that it's hard to get another government to come and talk to us. Of course, no one is opposing this, but the truth is that they are not making specific commitments to ensure that environmentalists are being protected, that are on the front line. And if I will fail as a young person, I will not highlight. I will be failing as youth if I don't highlight the urgency, rapid, effective, that will ensure that will help us avoid global warming. This is something that is non-negotiable for us, and we need to remember when we're talking about justice, we're talking about different types of justice. We're talking about distributive levels, and we need to know that the projects are not looking to be situated by the favorable countries. We have retributive countries. We have huge progress of panels, and right next to it there are communities that don't even have access to community. That is the reality of our regions. And as young people, we want not just to be part of the discussion. We don't just want to be invited to the events. We want to be an active part of the construction of a more inclusive society, and especially a just community. And this is what we were telling the ILO. We love this whole green jobs, but I would like more that you talked about work for young people, because we are also having issues to have access to empowering work. And these are things that need to be taken into account for a decarbonized future. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I have a very short question with the challenge that it has to be to the point. And this one you didn't have it, so It's always interesting for you to get angry, but then you'll get over it after the panel is done. You, as energy icon, when you operate in many countries, in many developed countries, and with a great participation of natural resources, and you have learned a lot. I have been able to learn a lot. What is one teaching that you believe that we should take into account in the framework of this just transition that will make shifts? If you will have to choose one best practice that does this, which one would it be? I would say participation. Decades of extraction of minerals and hydrocarbons, how an arrival projects generates this short circuit between the supposed quote-unquote benefit that the industry should leave in the territory, but also undesired impacts. And I believe that would have been able to be avoided if from the beginning of the project there was a clear recognition of the rights of the people that inhabit those territories and of their capacity to co-create the development of those territories. So I believe, as Ricardo was saying, the processes for renewable energies and all the topic that has to do with the closing the mines will have to change the visions and put the communities at the center of the communities and not just at the level of the territory for each one of the projects, but at the national public policies. This is a sector that usually has been close to participation, understood that is technical and distant for the common citizens, and I believe that this is what we should have to change in this new era of energy. Thank you very much, Anna. Very good. I love this one too. And let's continue with that same thing, Carlos. We talked a lot about financing and options to catalyze the participation of private sector and just transitions. A very straightforward discussion. If we had options menu to catalyze and escalate private investment, if you will have to choose two instruments, three practices, what would it be? Well, here that question is spectacular because I wouldn't choose anything. Why? Because we need to elevate and structure. And here is when we're talking about the financial instruments for the lab that integrate the local financial systems, the market regulators, young people, and the representatives for the civil society in the private sector. And from here, we would have to define, first of all, what are the prioritized sectors, because I agree completely. If we are saying that it's renewable just for the sake of being renewable for the mitigation of climate change, it could be interesting, but perhaps in terms of social impact, of employment generations, of social indicators, perhaps we have other options that could be more beneficial, and we should understand that there is perhaps something that has a greater mitigation potential, but it has a greater social impact. So it's very important to do this bottom-up approach. So I could tell you very clearly, Mr. Piñol, I think that transportation is crucial for the regions, and energy efficiency is crucial to close the access gap, universal access gap to energy is crucial with the mini grids, with the photo replacing diesel generators, for example, in the Amazon. Connecting this to bioeconomy is spectacular. and financial instruments for those. We have many, and we need to adapt the local community because I had the opportunity to work in the last 3 years with the Amazon, and it's unique. It's very challenging. We have co-ops, associations, the beneficiaries, the people that are going to lead those processes. They need a lot of technical assistance, and we will have to structure mechanisms that are very important to carry out the investings that we need to escalate the bioeconomy in the Amazon to replace us to solar plates and to solar panels. And I'm sorry, Luciano, for that I am answering. No, it's okay. Don't worry. Carlo? No? That's it. Ricardo, I have one last question for you. You are Sustenta Anyango. You are a youth organization, but you're highly trained with focus on the heart of the sector, not of the peripheral, like the energy planning, as you mentioned. And I'm sure that in the next panel it might come up this topic as well. And the truth is that when we participate in different forums on the energy sector, as well as things that have to do with climate change, in general, we see certain trends, certain keywords that start appearing with more or less frequency, but also you have this fresher set of eyes. What are we not seeing? If you had to help us to identify something that as a sector or that as part of the discussion is not in the agenda that should be, according to you, urgently, what would it be? One or two things? What would it be? Oh my God, I think that it's harder than my test. Well, the first thing that comes to mind, well, I've already mentioned one, but I highlighted the youth participation. Sadly, many organizations that listen to this, they say, oh no, I have a young people in the team, they're 40, but no, that is not youth participation. I am 40. I'm sorry for giving you a number. I am 40 years old. Oh, we're all youth. How many of you, for example, have an outlet to receive feedback from youth? How many of you can receive consulting group? How many of you invite young people? How many of you have an approach with schools, community? How many of you give microphones to young people? I leave you first with that thought. And second, let's not lose focus of the reality of the global south. Honduras is the reality is that a country where more than half people still cook with firewood. And why would you bring a Tesla and electrify the cars when at home? This is not happening. There are greater issues of air quality, of access to food that are affecting women, children. So let's bring this discussion of just energy transition to the Latin American context. Let's not let this a conversation made that at the end of the day is not applicable to our reality. That's it. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ricardo. It's a wonderful question that you returned with a stab to the heart of my 40 years. Thank you very much. And we haven't been able to connect to plug in with Fanny. Hopefully, we will be able to add her to the conversation. In the meantime, I would like to invite Enrique Becerra to the scenario. Enrique, my colleague and friend, that is in charge of the transitions linked to the oil and gas industry, specifically methane in the climate change team, and we will lead this. Thank you very much, and we leave you the floor is yours. Thank you, Luciano. Well, for this session, don't worry. I am not as eloquent as Luciano, and my apologies for the portuñol. But for this last session, we will invite Medardo Cadena, Director for Studies, Projects, and Information for OLADE. And also, Carlos, yes, Carlos, you just stay right there. And I would like to take Bartos Desimoni, who is part of the national initiative. I would like to add, apologies, the microphone is not being used. What does it mean, just energy transition in the context of Latin America and the Caribbean, and what will be the key elements that will ensure that these transitions are done, are made, and are specifically just? Well, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here with you. As we've been said that the options were English and Spanish and no Portuñol. I think I will speak in English so it's more clear. Also, I would like to thank you. I want to thank you when you used a picture when I was 23 years old. Look at this. I'm just looking at this. Who are these guys? This is not, it's not the people sitting here, but thank you. Well,
I can tell you guys a little bit more about the energy transition in Brazil, right? So one of the things that we can learn from energy transition in Brazil is how important subnational governments are in reframing how we see energy transition. And that is the gist of what I want to say here. We can't really pretend that energy transition is only an energy transition. It's not just about having more renewables, it's about redefining the development model of a region. And unless we present it as a redefinition of the development model of a region, we're going to have a lot of problems. So if you look at the Northeast region in Brazil, there is about 57 million people living there. And if you look at the past 10 years, you see a growth of 40% more wind energy per year and 120% solar energy per year. And if you look at it, you could say, well, that's amazing, right? That's a success case. But I would question it. Because the energy transition isn't framed as a development issue, it is seen as just, something nice for the economy that we can bring it to the region. And when we do that, we fail to help local governments, local policymakers, investors, and local communities to make that transition work. What ends up happening? And what happened is we didn't frame it that way. We didn't offer a policy framework or a public narrative or a discussion with local communities to say, this is a new way of doing things, this is a new way of seeing development. So what happens now is the way that we license, for instance, new wind energy, it is the same way that we've been licensing hydropower for the past 50 years in Brazil. So when you get to a local community, what are they going to say? This is bad. This has impacted us in a horrible, horrible way. At the COP last year, there was a mayor. She was the mayor of a small city of 20,000 people. She says, we have a huge problem caused by wind energy. The companies, they came, they installed, and now there are about 200 children that are being born, and the fathers have left, and we have a problem called the children of the wind. And it's a major social problem in our city, and we don't know what to do about it. So one of the lessons is, it's not just because it's renewable or green that it's good, that we can keep doing it in the same way that we've been doing old infrastructure, that we've been doing the same way that we've been doing everything that we've been doing wrong for the past 50 years. So we need to see it as a development issue so we can start doing things differently. We have to look at how local municipalities and states see it as an incentive and not necessarily just something nice. So many municipalities and states in Brazil will actually say, well, no, I get it, we need to get renewable energies, but you know how much taxation we get from oil and gas? Do you know how much of our public budget comes from selling gasoline and diesel? Because we didn't think of our local fiscal policy when we're installing renewables to compensate for the losses in the oil and gas sector that we need to do. So we didn't make this transition when we were thinking about it. So now there's no incentives for local governments to think of renewables as a way of substituting the old economy for a new one. We were talking in the Brazilian Senate about so many of the senators in the Northeast are welcoming gas power plants as an amazing investment and something very good and something that we need. But they were also very excited about hydrogen. And then a lot of the organizations were like, but listen, you know that if you have a lot of these gas power plants, you can't say you're having green hydrogen. And they were like, you're right. We hadn't really thought about this before. Why? Because we don't see the renewable energy as a large framework that will help redefine long-term development in the region. And we need to do this very urgently. We need to talk about licensing, new ways to do licensing. We need to talk about how to mainstream local finance, and you can talk about this way better than I can. Local development banks and a lot of public financing that is going to come in the next few years. We have to think about how new fiscal policy can be put in place to ensure that renewable energies are as desirable as oil and gas for the local governments. States have become a very important political actor in Brazil. When the previous federal government left a political void, a power vacuum in the climate field, a lot of the states came in to fill that void. And now we have consortiums, we have new ways of solving things, and these actors are very important on moving things forward. And then they can help the federal government, together with the local communities and the private sector, to frame renewables as a new way of developing a region, and not only as a way of just generating a new couple of jobs. Because what's happening over there now, and it's also happening in the Brazilian Amazon, is that new oil fields have been found. And these local governments are like, oh, thank God. That's amazing. That is such good news for us. We're going to have so much revenue. We're going to generate so many jobs. Finally, quality of life of the local population is going to be able to come up. Why? Because that's the old narrative. And we haven't been able to substitute the old narrative for a new one, to show that together with renewables, we can bring renewable industry, we can bring renewable products, and that can have a difference in the long term. And it's hard to tell a governor or a mayor, don't do the oil and gas stuff, when we don't have a clear alternative in a region that is extremely poor, extremely unequal. So we need to build these solutions to be robust, to be complete, and to offer a new development model that we can finally say, don't open this new oil field, we have better options. And I think that's all I'm going to say for now.
Perfecto, Walter, muchas gracias. Es muy importante tener en cuenta los incentivos que hay que generar también para los actores estatales, pero subnacionales, digamos, si no, esto va a ser un proceso mucho más complicado. Hay un paréntesis, nosotros logramos el contacto con Fanny, entonces sería, ya podemos ponerla, sí, perfecto. No sé si es que ella estaba con un problema de conexión, entonces Fanny, no sé si nos escuchas. Fanny es Fanny Cuirú Castro, es la coordinadora general de COICA, que es la coordinación de las organizaciones indígenas de la cuenca amazónica, y uno no puede hablar de transición energética justa sin hablar de los pueblos indígenas de América Latina y del Caribe, que obviamente son afectados por los efectos negativos de esa transición energética, por ejemplo con la minería y los minerales críticos, lo que, bueno, estando ahora en Panamá en este momento es algo que nosotros no podemos olvidarnos. Entonces yo quisiera invitarle, Fanny, para que traiga su visión de cuáles son los criterios esenciales para la justicia desde su visión. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much.
Fanny, creo que su micrófono está mudo.
Fanny, I think that
Podría-
your microphone is
No le
muted.
escuchamos.
I cannot hear you guys.
Ay, sí, es una lástima, pero bueno, en otro momento yo quisiera volver con la pregunta.
And,
Entonces,
I would like
para
to
usted me dar
see-
cuáles son los
Oh,
criterios
it's a shame
que
that
son
we cannot hear
esenciales
this, but we would
para
like
que
to see
nosotros
what are
podamos
some of the
clasificar
key criteria
un proyecto, un proceso de
so we
transición
can rate
energética
the
como justo
projects
según
for
su visión,
energy
por favor.
transition based on your vision, please.
Bueno, muchas gracias.
Well,
Yo
thank
quiero
you
hacer un
very much.
comentario,
I would like to
en
make
primer
a
lugar,
comment,
que
first of all,
de las exposiciones del panel anterior, realmente yo me voy enriquecido con muchos conceptos que debo
taking away a
reconocer
lot
no
of
los teníamos
concepts
en el radar, al menos
that
desde mi
I
visión,
was
y que
unaware
todos
of
ellos
from
son
my visions,
sumamente
and
importantes.
many of them
La participación
are
de los
very
jóvenes es una
important, and
elección
the
realmente muy,
participation
muy
of
importante
young people
que debemos
is
tomarla en
very
cuenta.
important,
Felicito a
and
todos los
we need
panelistas
to take
por
into
todos los
account
mensajes que nos
for all the
transmitieron.
panelists.
Bueno, hablando de transiciones
And
energéticas,
speaking of energy transitions,
debemos mencionar que esta no es la primera transición
I have to
energética que vive la
mention
humanidad, ¿no? Es una
that
cadena de transiciones que se han
we can
venido
see
dando,
everything
pero es la
that has
primera
been
vez
happening, but this is the
que
first
cuando se habla de
time
transición energética
that when we're
se
talking
incluye el
about
calificativo
energy transitions, we
de
are
justas.
including
Y
the
creo que eso
adjective
obedece a
of
toda la
just,
experiencia
and I believe
anterior
that this
y todos los efectos negativos anteriores que ha vivido la
answers to
humanidad y
all
que
of
las
the
consecuencias se
previous
están viviendo
effects
hasta la
and the
actualidad.
consequences that we can see
Los efectos del
for
carbón
the
en su
authorities,
momento,
the carbon
la
effects,
incorporación del petróleo y todos sus
the
impactos negativos
incorporation,
al ambiente, a las comunidades,
working
el surgimiento de las
for
grandes
the
hidroeléctricas
different
hacia la
communities,
mitad del siglo XX,
and
con todos los
everything
impactos que produjo
all the
también y
impacts
realidades
for
como la
the
que mencionaba
20th
Ricardo,
century of,
de que
and as
comunidades
well as what
sin
Ricardo
servicio de
mentions
energía
that
asentadas junto a los
energies
grandes
without
reservorios de las
energy
hidroeléctricas son
services
realidades que
that
las
have
hemos
been
vivido y que
affected,
realmente
that
lastiman el
have
alma
been
y
lived
que nos llaman
in.
a la reflexión. Y creo que eso es lo que nos tiene acá sentados discutiendo, bueno, ¿qué debemos hacer para que las
And,
transiciones
what could happen
energéticas sean justas?
for the
Y
energy transitions
a diferencia de las
to make
transiciones
sure that
anteriores
the
que fueron
energy
motivadas
transitions are just. And because of the resurgence of this, and these energy transitions has been motivated mainly by the imminent risk that the planetary unit has due to global warming. And this is what triggered all of this. The interesting thing out of all of this is that out of the road that we have covered, there are new concerns that have popped up, new elements that need to be put on the discussion table. For example, what is the cost of those transitions? How are they distributed and who is assuming those costs? What are those investments that are required by the region? I have seen endless number of numbers that we have to bring. All of them differ, but they all coincide in the fact that they are astronomical numbers. And well, we have the next number. Does the region have enough number? Do we have the capacity to attract these numbers? And there are another group of conditions. How can we generate conditions so that the investors and project promoters are identified by this project? And here comes to play things like risk management and also the need to develop new local economies so that this whole process of mechanism helps us as a mechanism to generate new sources of income. So out of all this concept, what are the key aspects we can mention? First of all, we have a harmonious development of the whole energy value chain. And we have identified when we're talking about transitions regularly, we're thinking exclusively of the sources, supply sources. And well, we have examples in the region where we demonstrate that we have forgotten that we have transition mechanisms and we require to have this to reach the sources. And we are at risk of generating great intermediate problems that will make sure that will keep us from reaching this. If we are trying to bring investments and attract investments, obviously we need to manage risks, and I believe a way that we can handle this and someone that can speak in ownership of this is starting from a solid institutionality. That is a key factor of a relation that is solid enough and that has been defined and not adapted, because what we're looking at is that we start off from regulatory topics that have been made for the traditional scheme for energy supply based on fossil fuels and hydroelectricity. And with the follow-up of renewable, what we did is that we just patched up and adopted that regulation to allow the incorporation of renewable. And what we are putting in evidence right now is the need of redesigning this whole regulatory area for the new realities that we are living and the issues that are coming up for the reincorporation of the renewable. Another key aspect is to precaution the possible areas, but this is a topic that has not been developed on us, and we have to take advantage of this area so that we can generate new aspects, and this is a key aspect in the region. The region is a region rich in energy resources, renewable and also non-renewable. But let's reference the renewable one. So we have in the region the areas with the highest solar radiation. Towards the southern cone, we have the greatest aeolic areas for offshore that could have plants that are stable. Since we have an unused aeolic or wind energy opportunity, I believe that these numbers give us an idea of the wealth that we have as a region. But the fact that we are wealthy in resources doesn't mean a thing if we are unable to take advantage of all this wealth to close those social gaps we have. And how can we do this? Well, by generating new production sectors, not becoming simple importers of technology, but developing the local capacities for the young professionals out of the whole experience to take advantage of this wealth to generate new sources of income, to generate opportunities for all this population that doesn't have access to just employment, and to everyone that doesn't have access to electricity, to surpass those levels of extreme poverty that we're seeing. So this energy transition and this that the region can see has to be seen as an opportunity of the region to revert all of those damages and all of those issues that we have been carrying as a result of all the prior processes that we've been doing. And finally, something that really calls my attention that I wanted that really caught my eye from the previous participation. It's the responsibility of the decision makers and the designers of public policies to create this according to the internal realities of each one of the countries without avoiding to look what's happening abroad. But it's happening there as we are looking at the public policies, looking at what's happening around us, and we don't truly look at the local realities and the realities of each one of the cities, and mainly for the cities that we're helping. We don't look into what's happening there. Thank you very much, Medardo. Destiny is wise because we are going to close with Fanny. Fanny, we can hear you. I don't know if you can hear the question, Fanny, but it has been very relevant for us, as you said, to have the indigenous perspective of what is just energy transitions that will benefit you with oxygen and energy, but will also protect you and protect the territories in the negative aspects that possibly this energy transition can bring you. You can speak. Thank you. Fanny, if you click at the bottom at the top, there's like a microphone. And can you see it? Well, Fanny, unfortunately, apologies for the technical issues. Unfortunately, we could not hear you, but I would like to give the microphone to Carlos. I would like to compliment, and then we will have closing with Luciano Caraccioli. Okay. Well, just to complement the brilliant contributions by the colleagues, I totally agree that the new regulations are needed. And here is the topic that I mentioned. We need to create laboratories for financial innovation, considering that we are having all stakeholders participating, and that is a reality. And for the market regulations, and we can all have it. And well, we have created our regulations, and just we have created this financial sector. We need to listen to the civil society, to the young people, to the private sector. How does this work? There's a risk. How can we reduce the risk? And how do we compensate this? What is the best option to work on the financial and non-financial record? So that is essential. And the topic regarding the value chain and to create quality work, perhaps we need to think of how can we take advantage of this transfer of what is happening, Mendes, of this relocation of the value chain that is being relocated from China, and we are trying to relocate the solar options, and it's not just solar, but of the topic for critical minerals. We're talking about the lithium triangle. We shouldn't just need to be focused on mining and just to send it to China to be produced. 90% of the lithium is produced in China. Let's bring the lithium production to China, Argentina, Bolivia, for example. Let's produce batteries. Let's produce electrical vehicles. So we have this whole process of development we are talking here about development. It's development. This is not a focus just of mitigation and climate change. It's very important, the mitigation of climate change. This is why UNDP, as a UN agency, is so important. So if we're talking about subnational, I worked a lot with the subnationals in Brazil, in the public banking, in Basa, in the Amazon, and the Norges Bank in Demije. So this private subnational bank is important. When we're talking about development, we're talking about sustainability, and it's important for an investment to prioritize sectors and technology. And we need to close not just the mitigation for climate change, we need to structure key criteria. We need to have criteria for climate change, social criteria, and even for the generation of employment, young people, women, institutional, financial criteria to be able to structure an investment and prioritize, because we are talking about different possibilities and we need to prioritize. And the prioritization in terms of mitigation and climate change is not so favorable, but in social terms, in that first moment, it will be technology more prioritary for each country. So I even work with the National Development Bank in Brazil, more or less following those 6 dimensions that I just mentioned for public-private partnerships and concessions for energy projects. So here, I believe that we need to get those needs together, and we need to it's probably going to be a priority in transparency, but there's another topic, the topic of transparency, but also for climate change, but also for local communities. The social topic is more important. Adaptation is very important. So we need to have pragmatic tools to be able to rate those investments and to align those needs and the investments for the local communities and the development of each country. I don't know if with this the topic has been introduced. I wanted to thank you all three. My apologies for all technical issue. This is something that happens. Thank you very much, Merardo. Thank you very much, brothers. I am going to paraphrase words. We are Latin Americans and Caribbean, and we don't give up ever. I think that we've done it, and we will conclude with Fanny's come with Fanny's remarks. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Hello? Yes, Fanny. Yes, we can hear you. Please go ahead. Okay. Okay, so I had to do it via cell phone.
La pregunta nuevamente, yo tengo que entender este tema, no voy a prender el...
Base, I'm not going to turn on my camera. I cannot hear you. Hello? Yes, 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 we can hear you. Yes, we can hear you. Yes, we can hear you. Yes, Fanny, we can hear you.
Me salí del computador, pero voy a volver a entrar. Bueno, perfecto. Entonces, claro.
Well, perfect. So the question... Fanny, if you could hear me, the question is what will be the criteria according to your visions and the people that you represent are essential. So we could say that energy transitions are just so that we can fix the issues of the mining of critical minerals bring to the indigenous people, but also that will allow access to energy. So based on your vision, what will be that criteria to define an energy transition as just? We will thank you. Yes, well, good afternoon. Well, there's an echo. I would like to start by saying that indigenous peoples, we are not an obstacle to development as it's always been seen as an obstacle for development. But here is where the question comes from. Can we create development projects? So the question that I pose here is who is development for? This could be renewable, non-renewable energies. It could be a project of this affects the territories and the indigenous culture because it's always focused on the indigenous territories. It's not that we are not against energy transitions. These are the options that we have to avoid effects against climate. But here comes the question. Is there a benefit for the indigenous people? That is the question we should ask each other. If you start looking at the projects that we've had of wind energy parks, for example, in Colombia, in La Guajira, this has been a conflict for the indigenous people because it has been greatly affected the unity of the people and as well as the culture of the people. And who are the greatest beneficiaries of these developing projects, if you could call it that? Well, obviously it's not gonna be indigenous peoples. Even if it's non-renewable energy of the things that happen through the whole Amazon basin, Belo Horizonte, what happened with the indigenous tribes there? Displacement. The rivers were dried out and deviated and were run out of course. So this has been affected. It doesn't matter whatever the areas are. These are not the beneficiaries. The indigenous peoples are not the beneficiaries. Perfect, Fanny. We hear you. Thank you very much for your words and for your participation. I know that it's been difficult, but thank you for staying with us and sharing your vision. Thank you once again for you. And I would like to give the microphone to Luciano Caratori that is going to close the sessions. Thank you very much for the patience. Luciano, please. Thank you very much, Enrique. Thank you very much, both panels. Thank you to Fanny for your insistence for us to be able to listen to her voice in this discussion. And we were talking at the beginning when we were listening to Daniela and Ramiro regarding the need and the insistence of a definition of what is energy transition and what is just energy transition, but we have obtained several elements that have come up from your interventions and from all three panels of the first panel and Fanny's intervention. And I believe that there is something that can be summarized in a word: synchronization. The COP27 of it has a check of looking at this in a simple ways of maximizing the positive impacts for the transition over people and to minimize the negative impacts. To maximize the positive impacts, there is a word we can say, which is the synchronization, which is to synchronize the offer and the demand to avoid the opportunities for the energy and to synchronize the support for the infrastructure to be able to carry out the sources of those new energy demands and the financing for better projects. As Carlos mentioned, the decarbonization of the priorities of development of this country for the mitigation and adaptation, putting as so we can see how we can develop this. So we need to have a local dialogue for the private sector, the public sector, and that way we are very happy to be able to continue taking this additional step in Latin America and the Caribbean, in Panama, and what's next? We continue here with the construction of this framework for transitions and collaborations for the just energy transitions that it's looking to prioritize these criteria in realistic areas. And we are trying to feed the global stocktake. And for the climate champion, and we're waiting to see what are the general criteria. Thank you very much. A round of applause for the last panel and for yours.
Fini. Apagate el micrófono.